and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Chloe.
Hey! So excited to be on here today.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So Chloe and I met some long time ago, and so I have met. Actually, our whole families have met, but the very first year I had met her family, it was at a family retreat. Um, and that was cool. Like that was my first year. I think your family had already been going for a couple of years, so it was fun just to like meet, and then we would every year. That's kind of how we caught up. Was we got to see each other in person, and then our eventually like our families like started talking and stuff, and so we both had not been to the same retreat in a couple of years, like 4 years or something like that. Um, yeah, but technology is a powerful thing, and now we get to talk, and it's great. Yeah. So if you could lay out your family structure in terms of like the birth order, any siblings you have, and your siblings with a disability, and then you're free to not use anyone's names depending on how discreet you want to be. But yeah, if you could lay out your family structure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am the second oldest out of 6 kids. I mean, half of us are adults now, so
Yeah, yeah, it's it's crazy, isn't it? Like we had met so long ago. We were not adults at that time.
so I have a brother who's older, and then so we have 3 girls, 3 boys in my family. So a brother who's older than me. I have a sister who's a couple years younger, a brother who's a couple years younger than her, and then another sister and another brother. So the youngest two, Charity and Nico, um, both have special needs. Nico is 13. Charity just turned 17. So yeah,
Man,
that's no.
17.
I know.
I'm
It's
trying. I
wild.
met her when. Wow, that is crazy. Yeah, I met her definitely when she was under the age of 10. I don't know
Yeah.
like how much, but I know it was man. That's crazy. Okay, time flies. Um,
I
yeah, yeah. Uh, can you describe if you could like lay out Charity and Nico's disabilities and any fun facts you would like to share about them?
Oh, absolutely. So Charity and Nico both were diagnosed around birth with Down syndrome. And then Nico just has a lot of like behavioral stuff as well that is not like officially diagnosed as anything. Fun facts. So Down syndrome, if any of the listeners don't know what Down syndrome is, there's actually 3 types of Down syndrome, but the most common is trisomy 21, which means that you have 3 copies instead of 2 of your 21st chromosome. So normally everyone has like 2 copies of each chromosome, and for Charity and Nico, for their 21st chromosome, they have 3. So on March 21st, we celebrate World Down Syndrome Day because the date is 3/21. So, anyways,
That's
three
so
copies.
cool though. Yeah, I had never correlated that, but I'm like, oh, but that makes like perfect sense that that's a very honoring thing. Like,
Yeah, it's super
yeah,
things that you think about, like, oh, the date and what this means. But yeah, and Charity was born on World Down Syndrome Day. So,
aw,
more cool.
yeah, extra celebration, extra cake.
Yeah.
Cool. And so on this podcast, my goal is to kind of have it as an open forum, just because as siblings, a lot of times we kind of get underappreciated or underrated, fly under the radar. So definitely there's lots of like feelings that we all have and thoughts that we have. So is there anything that you want to talk about in particular today?
I think, like, when I was thinking about the podcast and when I talk to anyone about being a typical sibling, or just anyone about like special needs in my life and whether they have experience with disability, special needs or not, I always just like to say, like, I love being a typical sibling, and that's not something that I would at all want to change. And that being said, and we're going to probably get into it on the podcast, there's a lot of hard things that come with being a typical sibling. And my life has been a lot different than my peers who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but being a typical sibling is, I I love having Charity Nico in my life, and that being in the world of special needs and disability has like definitely shaped my life and my career and just like who I am as a person. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, it's very like I will use the words life altering. I feel like that sounds very extreme, but like it's at the same time I feel like it's accurate because it's just very yeah, like your life trajectory is just very different. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
this yeah, like
It's
yeah, I
life
think
altering every aspect of the word.
yeah, and I mean it's one of those things where like literally like we would have never met
Mm-hmm.
if we were like right if for both of your siblings and my sister like it's just one of those like yeah like we would have never met and
Yeah.
I think and that's like one of the something that I think I've grown as I've grown older I've learned to more appreciate those types of things where like yeah like there's just people you wouldn't have met or there's just interactions you would have never had or things that you literally would not have experienced because you wouldn't if like we were just all like typical and normal and like kind of just went through life and it's like whatever but it's so different.
Yeah. It's really crazy to like think, like sometimes I think about that, or I'll talk with like some of my other siblings about that, and we're like, wow, like we're like, what would life be like if Cherry and Nico were in our life? Like, we'd miss out on so many things, but it would just be so different. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around, like, I don't know what that would be like.
Yeah, and I used to like I feel like when I was much younger probably like elementary school middle school like I used to question it a lot more in a what is that word? It's much more in a like philosophical way where I was like, what would my life be like because my friends don't understand how I feel? And I
Hmm.
think that was like and
Yeah.
that was just really tough like and I think you had mentioned it briefly, but it's just like yeah, like no like it's very hard to relate to us or we can't relate to other people because it's like the experiences I have in my house, like not even like outside, but just like inside, um, like with Angela, like running laps around the house. Like she would like we would eat dinner, but like you know where a normal family would just be eating dinner. Like Angela would like take a bite, literally run a lap around the house, sit down, take another bite, run a lap around. Like that was normal, right? And we would me and my parents would like talk, and then she would run laps, and it's like right, but my friends don't they're never gonna understand that feeling of what that's like. So it's like I don't. It's really hard, just like when I much more so when I was younger. I think like in school trying to like connect and you kind of can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely harder when you, well, I think it's, yeah, it's, it's a different kind of hard when you're younger, I would say. But
Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like that's also like I've talked about this with my mom and like my other siblings, and sometimes she'll be like, "Oh, for like your other siblings, like the ones that don't have disabilities but are younger than me." She's like, "Oh, it's like different for them because they're closer in age to Charity and Nico. Like my
Mhm.
brother, he's 7 months older, so him and Charity are like almost the same age,
Oh, okay.
because both Charity and Nico were adopted. So, but like I was when we brought Charity home, I was like 7, I think, and then like 10 with Nico. So, like, I was in a different place as like as a sibling, I guess, than someone where your whole life you're growing up with like someone that's like.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
But anyways,
yeah.
yeah.
How would you like? How do you think your relationship has changed with Charity Nico? Like as you've like now that you're all more like adults versus when you were all like kids growing up.
Hmm. I mean, I think because I was like a little bit older, and I love taking care of like babies and all of that, and we we brought them both home when they were babies. Like she was in the hospital when she was first born, but my parents got custody of her when she was like a day old. And then Nico, my mom picked him up when he was like 2 weeks old. So they were both like babies. And
Mm-hmm.
7 to 10, like loved babies, loved kids. And so because my mom, when Charity came home, she already had a 7 month old, like there was a lot for me to do and help. So I felt very like needed, and like I got to do stuff and, be a big girl and help feed babies and like
Oh
rock.
yeah, yeah.
Um and I think like, so I think that kind of has in a sense stayed the same because, I'm both of their older sisters, and so there's kind of like this, like I want to take care of them, and um like yeah, I still help change them or feed them or whatever needs to be taken care of. So I feel like in that sense it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's just that I'm older, they're older. There's more things I can do. Like I can drive them places. I can,
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I feel like I've always kind of had that, like a little bit more like a mothering sort of like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you're safe and all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think with Angela, I feel like when I was younger, it was much more like a what is that? Like how do I prevent her from getting hurt versus
Yeah.
now is much more a like what can we do so that she just enjoys it, cuz there's just certain things that they kind of grow out of, like for her, like she doesn't bolt around as much. She has to be like in a very bad mood to start running around, but she used to just do it like on a whim. um so it's interesting now that like because like I feel like the caretaker part is always like subconsciously just like in you, because if I see that she's upset, like I like go back into like
Yep. That
that
mode.
mode. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, and I can't even, and it's so weird because it's like it's so hard to turn off too when
Yeah.
you see it, like in any person almost. Like that's been something that's hard to like. I'll see other people and I'm like, and it's a very like fine line of like you're a stranger versus like, oh, you're my coworker or you're my friend, and I'm like, okay, where do I be supportive but not just like overtake and like try to fix all of it, because it's just because we're so used to fixing
Yeah.
it and like moving through the next thing, or like there's people staring at us like we need to like move on, or like you're at home and you're just trying to like just get through the next hour type of thing.
For sure. And I think like I've seen that like when I go, because I don't live at my parents' house anymore, but when I go over there quite a bit, and like sometimes I'll be over there and something's happening with Charity or Nico, and I like step in, I'm like, okay, like with my other siblings, okay, this needs to happen or you need to do this, and they're like, Chloe, stop it, like you don't. I'm like, it's like that subconscious, like, okay, what's the situation, we need to take care of it, we need to get it under control,
Mm-hmm.
move on with our life.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such a second nature thing. It's not like we're trying to do that. It just happens.
Yeah. I think what you said too is also a good point. Like how you said with Angela, you're a lot more like now wanting to make sure she's enjoying life. And I think I do think those things through like more. Like I'm like
Mm.
Charity, they're both teenagers now. Um, but even though Charity may not, I'm trying to think of something, I don't know, like if we do like a girls thing, it's like I want her to be a part of that because I'm like, she's that age, that's what girls
Mm-hmm.
do, even knowing that she might only like really want to be there for like 10 minutes and then that's the end, but she wants to go. And so like how can we, you know, I don't know if that makes sense. And just like
Yeah.
what are things that she likes to do that's like she loves to go shopping at Target. So like let's hone in on that. And if she has gift cards or birthday money, like, stuff like that. So
Yeah, because it's about like incorporating them into like as like normal, and I use that very like lightly of a life that like that they could get, because essentially it's this other weird thing that like it's almost like, oh, if we don't get to do it with them, like they'll never get it, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a very like a sound, and again, like it sounds dire, but it's just like on some level that's true, right? Because unless if someone is going to take like go out of their way with the intention of like, hey, like we're going to go to this place for vacation, or like we're gonna go to this restaurant and eat this thing, or like we're gonna go to Target, like they're not gonna, that they can't necessarily vocalize that. I mean, if
Yeah.
they can, they have to be with someone who's gonna say, okay, let's do it, instead of, no, you can't,
Yeah.
which is
And,
very
and it has to be
hard.
someone to take on the risk. And I say that with like quotes, but like I feel like in our family we never know, like we might go to the zoo and it might be like everyone has good attitudes today, good behaviors, it's gonna be great, and then we're there for 10 minutes and we have a major meltdown, and it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. You have to go into it knowing, like my mom and I were just talking about this, you're hoping for the best, but you really have to plan for, like, these are all the bad things that can happen.
Oh
Do we have
yeah.
prepared? Do we and sometimes, like she said, sometimes she's like, this is just like the chances of this bad thing happening are pretty high and I don't feel up to doing it. And so sometimes it does feel like it's, well, I if I go and I'm like, okay, mom, I'm gonna go with you to the zoo, then she's like, okay, we'll do it. And it's just like, all right, let's see what happens. So
No, yeah, it's crazy because it's like, so our family, so we went to Disneyland a really long time ago when I was like still in elementary school, and we took my sister, and at that time traveling with her was a very different thing, because obviously like I was like in elementary school, right? Like my aunt came with us, so at least there was like more people power type of thing. But at that time it was like such a different thing versus when we had gone, I don't know, what was that, 2017 or something like that. We went again, and like I was so tired because my brain like the entire time is just on, right? Because it's like, oh, we're at the hotel, like, okay, we have to get from the hotel to the park, okay, like where do you park the car, because obviously like they have the candy cat placards and stuff, right? So it's like, how close can you get, but like what time do you want to go, what rides can you ride, not ride, that are gonna like set off all their sensory triggers and stuff, where can you walk that's like not super loud with the food, like there's all these things, right? And so I was like, I remember on that trip we went for like 2 or 3 days or something, and so I said to my dad, I'm like, why am I so tired? He's like, well, because you're like, your brain is just being used all the time, right? Because like we didn't do a lot in terms of like, we didn't like ride 17 rides in a day or something like that. We were just leisurely walking, but like my brain the whole time is like, are these, like, because you just
yeah.
don't know what people are gonna do or what they're gonna do, or like,
And it's not
yeah,
like a contained place. So it's just like we don't know what's gonna happen.
yeah.
I totally like can relate with Disneyland because that's kind of our family's like vacation, and we went in the summer, just like our immediate family, and we went
Mm-hmm.
for like, I think we were in the parks like 4 or 5 days, because usually if we go we're like, we're gonna go.
Yeah.
But it was like we had a lot of meltdowns, a lot of different behavioral things, and Charity and Nico are like very different. Like Charity's like, I want fast and scary rides, and if it's not like adrenaline inducing, then I'm bored and I'm done and I want to go back to the hotel.
Okay.
And Nico's like, I'll go on rides, but it can't be like too scary or too like crazy
Oh
out with the characters. But if the character that I want to see is not there, then there may be a meltdown or multiple meltdowns happening until we find that character, but then they're going to leave eventually. And so, like, you and I, like, thinking back, like, I get so, like, wound up, I feel.
yeah.
It's like, calm down. But I think it's like what you said. It's like, I'm like, okay, this needs to happen. Okay, we need to go here and we need to make sure we have this and this is going to happen. So you're just like, got to be prepared for everything.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's like if I went to Disneyland, like it'd be so funny. Like if me and you went, because it'd be so different. Because we would just be like, whatever. Like like it's almost like we don't care what we're doing. Because the fact that we could be there and not have to deal with it is so much like you know, like
It's just a
the
totally experience.
yeah, that's why it's such an interesting thing how much like we will automatically deprioritize like our own wants so that either we can deal with their meltdowns or do what they want to do and stuff. Like it's just yeah, it's just crazy how it's so like it's so like built in to the system to do it. Like it's not like we're trying to do that at all, but
Yeah.
it's very much a part of my subconscious. Is just like it just kicks in. Like I don't even think about turning it. It's like a light switch, right? It flicks and it goes and it's like okay, like we're just
Yeah.
doing this other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if it's like this for you, but like I get so happy when I see Charity and Nico enjoying something and having fun. And so it makes me want to be able to make that happen. And oftentimes, like, that means that what you want to do, if it was just you there or just up to you, is kind of, put to the side because automatically you're just like, okay, you're enjoying this. Like, we're going to do this. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think I definitely need to like enjoy that moment in time more. And I think I do. I think it's one of those things where like Angela will just do these things that are so funny. And like it's interesting cuz like I don't think other people think it's funny, but I think they're hilarious. Like yeah, she'll like we'll do something and she'll do something and I just like it's so funny to me. And I'm like, and I think those are the times I'm like, wow, like if that could just be my life, I'd be all about it because it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
like
all the time.
yeah, exactly. Because it's just yeah, it's so much more fun that I'm like. I mean, I am laughing at her, but at the same time, it's like but you know that she did it on purpose on some level, you know,
Right.
like
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we have definitely had those moments where it's like, yeah, we're sort of laughing at you, but you also know we're laughing at you and you're doing it because you like that we're laughing at you.
yeah,
Oh, it all works out.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
and that I think that was the thing that when I first like went to family retreat, I think that was something that I did not realize that um how do I explain this? So I had never met a group of people who understood any of those things. Right, just like in school or day camps or whatever that I would go to, like it's just not I can't relate to when people were like, "Oh, like I would fight with my brother and sister." Like, "Oh yeah, they stole my clothes," or "Oh yeah, they did this thing." Like I'm like I never understood what that was like. Also because it was just me and Angela. Like I don't have other siblings, so I'm like I have
Yeah.
no idea. And
Yeah.
so I remember going to family retreat. I was like, "Oh, like I can talk about these things, about these jokes about my sister and like people will laugh in a way that's like actually conducive to why it's funny, not because they're trying to like
Make
understand my joke."
Oh, okay. I got what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And it fascinated me so much cuz I was like, "Oh, like people understand my jokes now." Right? Because you have a variety, you have a mix of people who have been there so long interacting with people with disabilities that they you kind of like learn culturally like how it works. And then you have
Yeah.
other siblings that just actually understand what you're talking about without explanation, which is like my favorite part about family retreat was like hanging out like afterwards and stuff because we could all just like
Yeah.
talk about like our regular lives and it's like you don't yeah.
It's like stuff that like I think even like talking to you over the past couple of weeks, things
Mhm.
that I didn't realize that I like think or feel is related to being a typical sibling, and then you're like, oh yeah, same here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and like other people sometimes if I try to, like, they don't understand, or I just don't even bring it up because I don't even realize, like, that's why I'm thinking or feeling a certain way about something. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, this, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
comes part of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I forgot who I was talking. I remember like at we were at family retreat, and then somebody had said, "Oh yeah, it's such an interesting thing there because like in a normal social situation, you like go through these very like surfacey, like oh like what's your favorite food, where do you work, all these like very surfacey level things, right? And then you kind of get into deep water when you spend enough time." And this person was saying to me like, "Oh yeah, but like at family tree, it's like the inverse. It's like."
Hmm.
You just jump in, like you don't know where anyone works or where anyone lives. You just know all these other very like deep things about everyone, and then you have to learn all the like surfacey things.
And they're like, oh, like, don't you know that person? Aren't you friends? You're like, yeah, well, then where do they work? I don't know. But we're really good friends.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have a
that's
lot
crazy.
in common. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, I think and that's one of the things that I think it's something I was telling my husband was like, I what is it? Like I recognize now that like I'm in a very fortunate position where I've met other siblings to people who have disabilities, because I have come across recently, just like in like starting up the podcast and stuff, where I've met people where like they've met nobody, like it's just them, right? And
Oh,
like I'm like the first person that they're like, oh, like you're the first other person that I know that you have a sister with autism, right? Or just any disability for that matter. And it's made me like realize, I'm like, oh, like that's crazy, because it's like obviously when I was like little, that's kind of like we all feel it, but it just made me recognize like, oh, that's such a well, one, that's a struggle in itself already. Like being
yeah.
one of us is already its own hardship, but like to really have like not met anyone who understands even as an adult, or like when you're a teenager, I'm like, that is it's so hard. And that's one of the reasons why like I wanted to do this podcast, was just because it's like there's like so many of us out there that don't even realize that this is happening, or you know what I mean. I don't even have like the words to describe it, but it's just like there's so many people that won't talk about their siblings to other people,
Hmm.
which I feel like as I've gotten older, I do it less. In terms of like if I meet a new person, I don't know if you do it too, where like you meet a new person, you kind of like you talk about your siblings, and you're like, or like I just don't bring it up, right? Unless if it's like in context, if someone says, "Oh, my sister's taller than me," I'm like, "Oh yeah, mine too," and I just kind of like drop it. I don't like
Hmm.
further like go into that conversation, because it's just kind of don't want to. I feel like as an adult, I just don't want to deal with like, here's my
Having,
list of things.
I feel like I have done it more where um, I do talk about my siblings. Like, I'll be like, oh, yeah, I have this many siblings, blah, blah, blah. But I won't bring up that they have special needs.
Mm.
Because I'm like ashamed of it, but because I was like, I feel like I do that a lot where I'm like, oh yeah, and Charity and Nico are my siblings, and they both have Down syndrome, and they both were adopted. And it's like, well, that's not their identity. And so, like, why
Mm.
do I need to bring it up? Like, no one, like, obviously, if you know me well, you probably know that. But if you're just meeting me, like, you don't need to have that in your mind. You know what I mean? Like, you can meet
Yeah.
them, then, like, meet them for who they are. I don't know. So, because I had a classmate that, um, he, like, I talked about my family, whatever, but I guess I never mentioned that they had special needs. And then he like dropped by our house one time, and then he told my mom later, like, oh yeah, like Chloe never mentioned that Charity and Nico have special needs, like kind of as if he was like really weird, like, why didn't she say that? And I told her, I was like, it's what,
Mm.
because I was like ashamed of it. It's because I was like, that's not who they are. It's like a part of them, but it's not, you know, who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I used to do was like I would attach Angela like as my identity. Like it'd be like, "Oh, my name's Charlene and my sister has autism." And I
Yeah.
used to kind of lump it as part of me, and I think at some point when I was working, I was like, "Oh, like that's not right. Like that's not
Hmm.
who she is. That's not who I am either." Right? Like I am my own person, but for because I had for so many years kept saying it like that, I was like, "Oh, that doesn't that's not good or healthy just to only identify myself as her sister, right? And that she has autism." So it's been this interesting thing for me as like I the less I talk about her, the more I understand who I am apart from her, who she is apart from me attaching her to that.
Hmm. I wonder if I kind of like did that, like, or did that too, like especially like younger, like because
Mm-hmm.
it does feel like part of your identity. I mean, and being a typical sibling, like we're always going to be a typical sibling, and we're always going to have like just all of that being a typical
Yeah.
sibling part of us, and it's always going to be in every aspect of our lives, whether we want it to or not. Especially like depending on how close we are with our families and siblings and stuff. So yeah, that is a very interesting point. And like, I feel like I probably did that or do that without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But well, and it's this thing where like it's very much like you can only even come to that when you talk to other siblings. You know,
Yeah.
like and that's something where it's like it's just been interesting how much you think is you and then how much you realize like it's still us, but like it's just very much like here are your like sunglasses that that's how you filter the world because it's like I can't unsee certain things, right? Like in a public space, like if I see anyone that's like off kilter is not the right word. I will use that obviously within context where you understand what I mean by that. It's just like you already know like you already have like the story of like where they are, the disability, like you already know, like you can feel all of the things, and
Yeah.
you kind of just like because you can't unsee it, right?
Yeah.
Like I can spot that out faster than every other people who aren't siblings, right? Because other people are like, oh, like that guy's just really weird, or like, like they kind of like do the I'm gonna walk 5 steps in this aisle, like if we're like at Safeway or something, right? It's just they kind of go to another aisle, or they like walk away, and I'm like, that's not you. All right, like I'm just gonna do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You,
You're
yeah,
just like, okay, cool. I'm going to keep going along my business. Like, whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, just the things that like you see and don't see, like as a sibling. One of the things we talked about like before we were recording stuff is like the parental line and sibling line and how like it's like part sibling, part parent, entire sibling, no parent. Like it's a very like um
But
blurry space.
yeah, we could definitely talk about that. Um, yeah, I think I don't know if I said that while we were recording or not, but just about did I say that earlier about um when Charity and Nico came and I taking care of them? I think I did.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think so for our family, if like my parents want to go out and do anything or like go on a date or just whatever, it's kind of always been us as siblings who are the babysitters. I can think of like maybe 2 or 3 times where growing up we had somebody come and watch us or like a particular person. And then like grandparents did, um, but even then there was a lot of stuff that I would do. Um, So it never was quite like I would do like a lot of the diapering and stuff like that. Cause they're like, okay, yeah, Chloe knows how to do it. Or I would be like, I know how to do it. I'm going to do it. Kind of like that trust thing. And I think that's still like with people coming over to like watch them. It's like, I don't trust you. I'd rather just do it myself.
Yeah.
But so yes, all that to say that, um, I think when you're in that situation, you are more of the like the person in charge, and I don't know, just like growing up with them too, because cognitively they're not, sometimes they have certain ways that they do things or think that is like, oh, okay, you're cognitively behaving like a 17-year-old or like a 13-year-old, but then in other ways you're not.
Yeah.
And so there's, yeah, I think there's just a lot of things that I did and still do that are very much like I used to get Charity. One of my things in the morning was I would like get her ready because we shared a room, the three of us girls. And so like in the mornings, like she would wake me up. She used to wake me up really early and like come lay in bed with me at like 5:30.
Oh,
And
that
then
is early.
it was early. And then we'd get up and I would like shower her, change her, do her hair, all of that, which she hated getting her hair done and still does. And um but yeah, there's just like a lot of that sort of stuff. And I think like now that I have moved out, I think my mom like, it's not that she didn't realize what I did, but you know, there's like a, oh, okay, now I'm doing all of it. And I think that was good for me to like take a step back because yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but anyways, like to I guess bring it full circle to what you were saying, it's a very fuzzy line between being in a role that feels like you're a parent and being a sibling, especially when you're an older sibling. But I think it's also probably in any case, because if your sibling has some sort of special need or disability that affects them cognitively, then they're going to behave younger. So even if you are younger, they're still going to feel like there's like a age difference and you're
Yeah.
older. And I think just like a lot of the like looking out for your siblings and even like telling them when they're doing something that they shouldn't be and like this and like I don't know. There's just yeah, a
Yeah, I
lot.
don't know. There's a lot to it, but yeah, no, the whole like not living with your siblings that have a disability is such like I was like I don't even have words to describe it, but I have lots of thoughts. It's very ironic, but like
Yeah,
because
lots of
it's
thoughts that you can't put into words.
yeah, like it's just there's so many yeah, there's like so many feelings and thoughts and opinions because it's just it's crazy being apart from them when you
Mhm.
like know all these things about them that like and it's not to say like I ever like worried about it like when I was not with them, but it's this thing where like when you're not with them you're like, oh what you kinda just go about your day and your routine, you just go through life, right? And but when you see them, then it's different because now you have all these like
You're full.
flooding thoughts. Yeah, you have like all these like did they do these things and these things and these things and that? It's like and then it's like, oh wait, shoot, I used to do that, and it's this like it's almost like a waterfall that was
Mm-hmm.
dry that then now is like cascading into a river when you're with them. But then
Mm-hmm.
you go home and it starts to dry up, and then you go like, oh okay, whatever. And you just go through your like it's such like a ping pong back and forth of
Yeah.
like yeah, it's the struggle of that is very tough when you like it is when it's so much back and forth. Or at least what it was
Yeah.
for me. I don't know about for you.
No, I think that's a really good point because like when I'm here, I'm not living in that. But like if I hear certain things, like if I talk to my mom, she's like, "Oh, like it's been a hard day. Like we've had a lot of meltdowns, or like whatever happened, then it's like all of a sudden I'm like consumed with that. But most of the time it's like I'm not like in that, like I am kind of a lot of, I don't know. You can't turn it off being a typical sibling, and like even just being out in public and like things I
Yeah.
see or hear or feel, I'm realizing more and more it relates back to like my life.
Right.
But far, yeah, that like did this get taken care of, whatever. Um but I don't know, sometimes I still like, I think when I first moved out, I had a harder time with that, and like,
Yes.
are you guys going to be okay like doing this on your own, because
Yeah.
I do it all, like, you're going to be okay. And yeah, I think the other thing, which I don't know if this is really on topic with the question, and I don't know if you have felt this way, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel very guilty sometimes. I think there's a
Mm.
lot of guilt for different things that typical siblings can feel, but like as I've gotten older and busier and like working and school and just all of that, like when I am not able to like see them a lot and they ask about me, or just like, I'm just like, oh, I missed out on this like big thing in your life or whatever because I had to work or something. I'm like, oh, I feel like such a terrible sibling. Or like, and I
it.
think probably you could feel that way if you're not a typical sibling, but I think knowing that my siblings don't understand, even if they're told 10 times, oh, Chloe had to work tonight, she's at work,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that even if I'm there, they're going to be asking like, oh, when am I going home, just because, well, Charity does that, she just likes to know like the schedule kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I still am like, oh, like I feel so guilty that I'm not over there more, or not like taking you to do more things, or I don't know. So
Yeah. It's the I'm like trying to collect my thoughts because it's this thing where I feel like for me like it depends on like what's happening. I also feel like after like different things, so like yeah, I think when I got married, it was like one set of things, and then like when I moved even further away than I already moved when I got married, like it was like a whole different set of things.
hmm.
Um and both those things are different than when I like kind of was like in your boat of like I'm working but I'm nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all different because like what was happening with my sister, and then like there was all like these events and stuff that were happening for a certain period of time, like related just to her housing and stuff. And so it was this thing where I don't think I felt as much guilt as I did obligation to be present.
Mm.
Which those can be tied depending on how we view that, but we won't go into that. But like I
Yeah.
feel that the obligation to show up for all that was very high, because it's like, oh, like, we it was kind of like I felt like it's expected to show up and like meet all their parents and like help, not even help my sister with anything, but I felt like I was expected to be part of the situation. And that's hard, right? Because it's like it's not like I do or don't. Like, yes, I want to be part of this conversation because obviously like it impacts me as an adult, right? Like her housing is going to always affect me no matter what I do, right? Because as long as she's
Right.
alive and I'm alive, it's going to be a thing,
Yeah.
right? But it's this like, how do what, and this is kind of like a more philosophical thing, right? But it's this thing where like, how involved do I get in terms of I care about Angela, but I care about me, but like there has to be a line on some level, but like it's different if
Right.
she was just normal and lived somewhere else. Like it's not like that. Like and it's so hard because it's like how up to date do I need to be on where she's at versus me just kind of checking in on her versus not knowing anything versus like do I need to keep tabs with my parents to keep track of her or not, right? Because it's this thing where Angela is not as verbal as like Nico and Charity, right? She can't tell me what she wants to do, all of that. So it's like I am at the mercy of third-hand information at this point, right? Because my parents aren't even with her all the time. Her staff is like it's a rotational thing, right?
Wow.
And so it's this thing where like, well, I've met some of them and they're super cool people, and like, and Angela likes them a lot, which is great. Like, I'm very happy about that. But it's just this thing where even if I had not moved the distance I am now, like, I would still be getting third hand information, because it's like it's not what she is experiencing. It's this person who interacted with her, who then tells somebody, who then maybe tells my parents, who then maybe tell me, and it's like I don't know unless if I go, but like I'm also kind of like I can't I can't I can't and shouldn't be there all the time, because then she doesn't have a life. Because
Right.
that's unfair to her, right? And
You want,
it's been interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you kind of want her to have that adult independence, and
Yep.
then you also have to have your own, I guess, adult independence.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, how do we both live adult lives, but like enjoy it? And one of the things I think that's been helping, and so and this is just due to multiple things, is that when I Skype with her, which is really kind of funny when I say it out loud, because me Skyping with Angela is really just me talking. It's really not. It has no. Right, I try, but she's only gonna do so much in return. But like, but when I see her, when she's just like, she's so much more like relaxed and just kind of like hanging out versus when we were growing up. Like, I feel like
Hmm.
with our parents, all four of us were just like adrenaline is just very high, right? Kind of
Hmm.
like, because just like how you were saying about the schedule, right? Like, Angela's very like routine schedule, everything. I don't think she needs to know as much, but she definitely needs to have some concrete structure of like, these things are gonna happen, and there's certain things that have to happen no matter what, right? So
Yeah.
even if we like went to dinner and came home, like, she has to go through this like hour routine, regardless of if it's 10 p.m., midnight, 8 p.m. Like, it doesn't matter what time. She has to go through all the stuff, and so I feel like when all four of us were at home, it's just everyone's doing that, right? Everyone has, because then we have to kind of conform to the fact that like, okay, it's now 8:30. Now we have to all go through this thing together. Versus now, it's like, well, she has her own routine. I have my own routine. My parents have the right. Like, we can all be kind of like in our
Yeah.
own boats, and then like, oh, like, that's actually what my natural state of a human is, versus, oh, like, as a sibling slash parent in the same room at the same time with them. Like, it's like superhero mode, I feel like, where like, like, you go to the
Yeah.
elevator, you change costumes, and then you're like, I'm this person now.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah. I think the line, yeah, I don't really know where, I mean, you're you're at a different stage in life than I am, but I don't really know where the line and where the line is drawn and where it separates between having my own life as an individual and my siblings' life, because
Mm-hmm.
it will never look the same as other people that aren't typical siblings. and
Yeah.
and it also depends on, like, you know, like for you, it's just you and Angela, so
Yeah.
that's its own dynamic. Like, you're the only other sibling to help with stuff if something
Mm-hmm.
happens to your parents or whatever.
Yeah.
um and ours is different, but we also have both Charity and Nico, and so it's just like, it's different dynamics each family, and like how close you are and just all of that stuff. But it is, because I remember, who was I having that I don't know, I was having that discussion with somebody, and it was just like, yeah, it's just going to be different, because it's, you know yeah, I don't know how it's going to look, still trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. I might never know, it might always be trying to figure
Yeah.
it out, and
I
it's
oh
okay.
no, I definitely agree with the you're gonna perpetually be figuring out because it's just like it's so crazy. Like yeah, like if I were to meet like the 10-year-old version of me that knew Angela at that time versus now, like I'm pretty sure the 10-year-old version of me would be in very much disbelief
Hmm.
of like the progress Angela has made and how I interact with that as an adult. And it's not, I
Hmm.
don't mean to say that in a bad way at all, right? Like it's not that it's not like I didn't have hope at that age, right? Like I had the hopes for the world for her, right? Like there's all these things about what I feel like as a sibling versus a parent, there's just so much more imagination and hopes and dreams of like the magnitude of which they can really develop. Like I feel like that's very different as a sibling. Like that's one of the lines that is different as a parent, right? Because there's just it's just different. Um, and it's crazy just how much like we change as people just on a regular like all humans change as they grow older, but even more so for people with disabilities just because the way they interact with the world is so different, right? And it's like it's an evolving thing because as they developmentally kind of their brain catches up with how old they are in the physical world, like they do change in the same kind of ways where like we just did it like 20 years before they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, they go through the same kind of evolution of like, oh, like what I thought was going to work 5 years ago doesn't work anymore cuz you don't like those things anymore and it's like you're a different person now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think well you have some more time cuz my sister is older by a good amount than both Nico and Cherry, so you have time for to kind of like for them to grow into their like 20s and stuff. That's okay. I feel like it gets more complicated when they get older because it's the like the long game becomes more complicated versus
Yeah.
like when they're kind of like because now are you guys doing like conservatorship stuff with them right now because they're kind of hitting
I think
like
pretty
that.
I was just my mom about that for charity because I was like, don't we have to do that soon? So I think yeah, we're kind of in the process of starting that.
Yeah, so that's it's exciting and it's a lot of paperwork, but
That doesn't sound fun.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not super fun, but it's one of those things like. But once it's done, like there's such a like what is the word? You feel much more at peace about whatever's going to happen to them later
Hmm.
because you have that taken care of, and obviously like housing a very separate thing, but just the conservatorship itself, I feel like it's its own thing, and being able to have that conversation first, because having that conversation helps the like later on conversation. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Just knowing that there's a plan in place and yeah.
yeah, and then yours is interesting because you have other brothers and sisters to like and your parents. Like it was just me and my parents. So it was just they're gonna kind of decide things. They kind of like this is what the plan is. I'm like okay, like I don't whatever. But for you guys, it's a little bit more complicated. But I think, and that's the thing that kind of fascinated me as I've talked to other siblings is like I don't think I think yeah I've not talked to anyone who is in like my exact situation, right?
Hmm.
But everyone that I have talked to like we have talked about like the long game and just like what happens, but like all the feelings around it are very much the same. Like we can feel the same kind of like uneasiness and fear and like don't know, but like even though like our situations are like completely different, like from if you look at like a family structure standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point because I don't think there's I don't know if I would find anyone who's exactly in the same situation as like me or same for you, but like, yeah, the whole thing as a whole and figuring out what's the plan for the future, housing and I think like Charity and Nico are so young still, like I don't know where they're gonna be as far as like independence and like wanting to be on their own or and being able to. Like I think Nico would be the one that would be more like, I want some independence. I don't want to, and probably be more able to do that. Like Charity, I don't know, but I have no clue where where we're gonna be in like 10 years. No,
Yeah. It, yeah, it's one of those things, like, I don't mean to, like, bring that upon you, but it's also, like, that's just part of what's happening, too. It's like, but it's, that it's something that you're like not gonna talk to like your friends about because it's not like they're gonna understand that. So it's like, right, like all my friends like I don't. It's weird because it's like the yeah, like my very close friends in the like very inner circle like have some understanding of it because obviously it's gonna come up just because we're so close. But there's other people I'm like they're like forget it. Like I can just tell you generic information and we'll just move on because it's just kind of it's there's a time and place, and with you is not the time or the place. So I'll just like be over here.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, to end not on such a dire note, because I was like that's, but I guess that's just part
Well,
of it. But
okay.
are there?
I was just gonna say it's something like all siblings you're gonna face in some way, and it's not like a bad thing. It doesn't have to be like a oh this is so horrible because like we
That's
were talking about future stuff. It's just something to like be aware of, and
yeah.
it's a lot of the siblings you've had on the podcast so far are adults.
Yes.
Where they are in their adult journey, I'm not sure, but you know,
Yeah.
so yeah. Anyways,
Yeah. So to end us off, are there any words of encouragement that you would like to share with our fellow siblings?
oh, such a great question. Wow. Um, I think that if you have any like outlets or ways to meet other typical siblings, I think kind of like what we were talking about, that there are
Mm-hmm.
people that don't. But if there's any, I mean, there's so many different ways, like social media, like, I don't know, there's just so many different platforms now. I would encourage you to try to find other typical siblings, maybe somebody that has a sibling with the same disability as your sibling or similar, just because it can be isolating. And I think as a typical sibling, you can feel like, at least I felt this way, like, oh, I'm just feeling these things. I'm like, why am I feeling these things or thinking these things? And then you talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Cause I kind of felt like I was a little bit. So I would encourage you in that. And, you know, find the fun and funny things about being a typical sibling, and like we were talking about, like, laugh when you can. I mean, I
Yep.
think, I don't know about your family, Charlene, but we have way too many serious things just with special needs. With both my siblings have a lot of health things, and then just life in general, there's a lot of
Yeah.
serious hard stuff, and so we just end up laughing a lot, and we can't really be serious too long. So I would say, when you're able to, just laugh, like laugh at those things, laugh at, the funny things of being a typical sibling. Maybe that's when your sibling pulls out their diaper and throws it in during a fire performance. Not that that's like ever happened, but
Yeah. Yeah,
so
or just goes like to a buffet and was like, "I just want that. Let me just get it." Like, all
you know,
right, that's that's cool. I'm glad you know what you want to eat.
yep.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the things that I would say.
Cool. Well,
Yep.
thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. So happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.